Yeah, I'm Lawrence Freedman. I'm Emeritus Professor of War Studies at King's College London.
And obviously, we're now 3 months on from the initial Russian invasion of Ukraine. I was just wondering, what are your thoughts, your reflections on that milestone?
Okay, so initially the assumption was that the Russians would be able to uh, uh, push back Ukrainian defenses, take over quite a bit of the country, and even those, including me, who were skeptical of what they could achieve over the long term, thought that it would be a tough fight initially for the Ukrainians, and in the end, it might end up with an insurgency. Now, obviously, the Russians turned out to be less professional militarily than we assumed, had more trouble. And so the surprise was that instead of dominating the Ukrainians in battle, that they were the ones who in the end had to retreat, and they retreated from Kiev at and the surrounding areas at the end of March. So that in itself was a surprise. I think what's happened since is that they've obviously refocused on the Donbass, and I think initially their operations in the Donbass didn't look like they were being any more successful than than those that had taken place initially. I think we're now at a sort of tricky phase of the war because the Russian effort is much more focused um, on quite a narrow area. They're funneling all their activity into that area. Um, how much is going on is what's going on is hard to discern, but it's clearly, and I think President Zelensky has acknowledged this, pretty painful for the Ukrainians as well as the Russians. This is very hard fighting, very hard grind. And the outcome of it is not certain as yet. It's the sort of area you would have expected the Russians to have been able to take without too much difficulty at the start of the war, but then expectations shifted. Now it's a hard slog. The issue then becomes one of when and if the Ukrainians can mount counteroffensives. My assumption has been that they will take this slowly, that they won't rush. Um, and they've got a defensive battle to fight first anyway in the Donbass. Um, so I think this is quite an attritional phase of the war. Both sides are hurting. Both sides are using up equipment. I think over time, the balance favors Ukraine. Um, but, I think it's it's always been dangerous in this war to get ahead of ourselves and to anticipate offensives succeeding when they haven't yet started. There's some way to go yet.
Yeah. Just picking up on what you said there about the balance tipping towards Ukraine, as we look forward, how long do you think this could go on for? And do you think that we will see a Ukrainian victory?
Um, so there's two separate possibilities in terms of how long it can go on for. How long it can go on for at this level of intensity, I think that's limited. I mean, both sides are using are taking casualties, but also using up ammunition and equipment and material at a pretty fast rate. So you can't fight like this for another 3-4 months, I don't think. But you could, but things can calm down if, as seems to be the case, you have the Russians moving into quite strong defensive positions in, say, the areas close to Kharkiv where they've been pushed back, but they don't want to be pushed back anymore, or the areas around Kherson where the Ukrainians, I think, are pretty committed to an offensive at some point. If the Ukrainians feel they've got to respect the strength of these defensive positions, then you may find the fighting subsides for a while both sides are replenishing, building things up. So you could, I mean, it could end. This could last a long time. I think we have to be prepared for it lasting a long time, but not at the current level of intensity until at some point it picks up again. So that's my a very cautious view at the moment. I think it swings to the Ukrainians first because they've mobilized, and though the Russians seem to have found quite a number of extra forces, they're not, as you would expect, of forces that have sustained the sort of casualties they've experienced falling back. They've probably left more substantial mobilization until a bit too late, and it wouldn't be popular in Russia. And then, of course, you've got the backdrop, which it's hard to factor in, but it's obviously important, of the economic warfare that's being conducted, how Ukraine as a country keeps on going, how Russia mitigates the effects of sanctions, and so on. So I think there's a feeling that we're moving into a period of grind at the moment, rather than swift movement.